Gemini. Okay, this is already strange because the first card you gave me is the moon and it's reversed in the image, which honestly fits this message almost too well. Not as a prediction, more like psychological symbolism. Something hidden is trying to come into the light, but this person is still fighting with what they're willing to admit to themselves. And the first thing I keep getting is your face, specifically your eyes first, then your mouth, which is, wow. Okay, this person has studied expressions you probably don't even realize you make. The way you look away when you're thinking, the way your eyes narrow when you're amused, but trying not to show it the way your lips press together when you're holding something back. They remember them. And that's where the moon becomes interesting because this card is about projection, uncertainty, desire mixing with fear. They don't know how much of what they feel is something they can safely act on, yet there's attraction, yes. But there's also this almost embarrassing level of emotional curiosity. Like, why do I keep thinking about this person? And then immediately after that, I'm hearing, because if I admit why I have to change something, that is the hook here. Because I don't think the biggest secret is how attracted they are to you. I think the secret is what that attraction forces them to acknowledge. About the life they already have. Wait, I'm getting a door. Not an open door exactly. More like someone standing inside a doorway with one hand still behind them. Like they haven't fully left the room. And there's something about keys too. Keys, a bag, maybe belongings, maybe a car key specifically. I don't want to jump too far ahead because I feel like we're supposed to understand the attraction first. But there is a reason they are restraining themselves. And it is not lack of desire, actually. That's almost the problem. Because your eyes make them feel seen in a way they're not comfortable with, and your lips make the entire thing physical. The eyes are where they feel exposed. The lips are where their mind goes when they stop pretending this is innocent. And I'm getting the feeling. They have had to look away from you before just to regain composure. But the moon is hiding something behind the attraction. And I think the next card is going to tell us exactly what they're afraid. You'll find out. Oh, 9 of Pentacles reversed. Okay? That actually explains the money thing I was getting because upright, this card is independence, having your own space, your own resources. Being able to stand on your own without needing somebody else to hold the structure together, reversed. Something about that independence is compromised. And I don't necessarily mean they're financially dependent on another person. It could be that, but this feels more tangled than just, I can't afford to leave. It's shared expenses, shared space, shared responsibilities, maybe something with a home, a lease, a payment, a vehicle. There's definitely this feeling of, if I pull myself out of this, what else comes apart with me? Wait, that's why I saw the keys? Because I thought the keys were about them coming toward you. But I actually think the keys belong to the situation. They would have to leave first. A house key, apartment key, car key, something that represents access to a life they've built with somebody else. And that bag I was seeing, that feels different now too. Because this isn't somebody casually deciding whether they want to pursue an attraction. Psychologically, this looks like somebody imagining what separation would physically require. What do I take? What stays? Where do I go? Who pays for what? And notice how uncomfortable that is compared to thinking about your face. Because thinking about you is easy. Your eyes, your mouth, that moment where they have to look away from you because suddenly they are way too aware of themselves, that part is almost effortless. It's everything attached to admitting it. That becomes complicated. And I need to say this clearly. You did not create whatever problem exists in their current situation. I actually think that matters. Your attraction didn't walk into a perfectly fulfilled life and destroy it. If anything, you exposed a crack. They had gotten very good at stepping around because when somebody can tolerate something for a long time, they start calling it normal. Then someone looks at them differently and suddenly normal feels different. That's what your eyes seem to do to this person. You make them notice themselves, and your lips take something they could kept intellectual and make it impossible to pretend there isn't physical desire underneath it too. but they're standing in the doorway with one hand still behind them. Because something has not been cleanly released. A person, a commitment, an arrangement, maybe all three. And this is interesting because I'm getting another feeling now. I don't think they're the only one who has noticed the shift. I think whoever is on the other side of that doorway I already know something inside. This person has changed. And then you give me the Six of Swords, okay? That is almost too literal with everything we were just talking about, because psychologically, the Six of Swords is movement away from something that has become mentally exhausting, not necessarily running towards something better immediately. Sometimes it's just realizing I cannot keep living inside this exact situation, and look at how quiet this card feels. That matters. I don't think this is some explosive, dramatic, slam the door kind of separation. This feels planned, private. Like somebody doing calculations in their head before they ever announce that they're leaving. How much is in the account? Whose name is on what happens with the rent, the mortgage, the car? What do I actually own here? And I keep getting this weirdly specific image of somebody sitting somewhere alone and mentally dividing a life into categories, mine, yours, shared. And that is such a different kind of difficulty than just asking, do I have feelings for you? Because I don't think that's the question anymore. I think the question has become, what would wanting you force me to dismantle that's heavier? Because whatever they're connected to may not even be emotionally fulfilling anymore, but it is functional. There are routines, bills get paid, things are where they're supposed to be. Maybe families know each other. Maybe there are expectations around them. Maybe there's property debt, a business connection, animals, belongings, something that makes leaving feel less like ending a feeling and more like disassembling an entire system. And then they see you. That's the problem. Because suddenly they're noticing your eyes again, your mouth when you're talking. Some tiny expression you make when you're listening to them, and they go back into whatever environment they're currently attached to. And the contrast is uncomfortable, not because you're magically perfect, but because around you, they notice themselves feeling awake. Then they return to something where they may have been functioning on autopilot for a very long time. And once you notice that difference, it's hard to go back to not noticing it. Wait, the Six of Swords also makes me rethink the car key, because now I'm seeing someone actually driving, not necessarily toward you, that's important, away, just away. Like they have imagined what it would feel like to put something in a bag, take their keys, get into the car, and have one night where they don't have to explain themselves to anybody. And I don't think that image is new for them. I think they've already pictured leaving. And then you give me the Knight of Cups reverse. Okay, that changes the leaving image a little bit, because the Knight of Cups upright would be somebody following the feeling, going toward the person, saying the thing, making the romantic gesture reversed. They stop themselves. And that is exactly what this feels like. I keep getting someone going through the entire sequence privately, the bag, the keys, closing the door, getting in the car, driving somewhere. And then their mind goes one step further than they probably want to admit, because eventually you enter the picture. Not necessarily as I'm leaving for you. I actually don't think they want to frame it that way. It's more like they imagine what happens after they're finally alone and somehow their mind ends up on your face. Your eyes, especially, like they picture being able to look at you without immediately remembering everything they're hiding. That's different from just wanting to kiss you. Although, yeah, the lips are still very much there. But this feels less like fantasy for fantasy's sake and more like, what would it feel like if I didn't have to pull myself back every time I'm around you? That's the thing. They are tired of editing themselves. And I'm getting something very specific here. I think there has been at least one moment not predicting an event. Just symbolically, this is what the card is describing, where they were upset with the situation they're in. Picked up their phone and thought about contacting you. Maybe they opened your messages. Maybe they looked at your name. Maybe they typed something and deleted it because the Knight of Cups reverse is giving me emotion that reaches the edge of expression and then gets pulled back like, no, not like this. Wait, that actually makes me respect the silence a little differently, Because if they came towards you in the middle of a fight, in the middle of leaving, or while they were still financially and emotionally tangled with somebody else, you would become part of the mess. And I don't think they want that. They may want you very badly, actually, but wanting you and being ready to approach you cleanly are two completely different things. So when they imagine leaving, yes, they imagine you somewhere beyond it, but they also seem to know there has to be a space in between, a moment where they are actually separate, actually responsible for their own choices, actually able to stand in front of you without one hand still holding the old door open. And that makes me wonder if some of the distance you've interpreted as uncertainty is actually intentional. Because this person may not be staying silent because they feel nothing. They may be staying silent because they know exactly what would happen if they let themselves say too much and now you give me the Four of Wands. Okay, that's interesting. Because this card is usually associated with stability, a home, a structure, something established enough that other people can see it and recognize it. And that makes the restraint make even more sense, because this person may not just be trying to leave a feeling. They may be trying to leave an entire setup, something that looks settled from the outside, which means if they cross the line with you too early, it doesn't stay private in their own mind anymore. It becomes real. And I think they know that there's this pattern of almost messaging you later than they should, almost letting a conversation become more personal, almost holding your gaze for 1 second too long and then realizing, okay, I need to stop. Maybe there has even been one of those small physical moments where your hands were close, or you passed something to each other, or you were standing closer than necessary, and they became extremely aware of the distance between you, and they pulled back, not because they didn't want the contact. Probably the opposite. That's what makes this so uncomfortable. Contained attraction tends to get louder, especially when somebody's deliberately trying not to feed it. And the lips thing keeps coming back, but now it feels like it has two meanings. Yes, they think about kissing you. I'm not going to pretend that isn't here, but they also watch your mouth because they want to know what you would say if they told you the truth. If they said, this is more complicated than you realize. Would you understand? Would you be disappointed? Would you still look at them the same way? Wait, I think that last part is actually a bigger fear than I realized. Because right now there's still some safety in the unknown. They can wonder if you feel it. They can imagine what you might say. They can keep everything suspended in that space where nothing has technically happened. And as frustrating as that is, it protects them from consequences. Because the second they confess something or touch you in a way that cannot be explained away or ask the question, they keep swallowing. Would you want me to? The entire situation changes. And I don't think they're afraid only of you saying no. No would hurt, but no would also give them somewhere to put the feeling. Yes, that's different. Because if you looked at them with those same eyes and said yes, then they would have to confront the fact that this isn't just fantasy anymore, and suddenly staying halfway inside that old doorway would become much harder to justify. And now you give me the Five of Pentacles reversed. Okay. That's interesting, because upright, this card can be about deprivation, feeling shut out, staying in a situation where you've convinced yourself there aren't many options reversed psychologically. It can be that moment where somebody starts realizing the door was never as permanently locked as they thought. And wait, I don't think you're only representing another relationship. Possibility to this person. I think you represent a version of them that sounds strange, but stay with me. There's something about the way you carry yourself, or maybe just the way you respond to them, that reminds them of who they were before they started making themselves smaller to keep something stable, before every decision became practical, before they started asking what keeps everything functioning instead of what do I actually want. Your eyes are doing something really specific here. They're not just seductive because they're attractive, they're reflective. When you look at this person, they become aware of themselves. And I think sometimes they like what they see through you more than what they've been seeing in their own life, which is okay. That's much deeper than attraction. Because now your mouth means something different too. Yes, there's still physical desire, obviously, But I also keep getting truth around the lips, things they haven't said, things they swallowed, because saying them would inconvenience somebody needs. They stopped expressing opinions. They softened maybe even parts of their personality. They gradually put away because maintaining peace became more important than feeling fully alive. And then you show up or they notice you, and suddenly those parts start waking back up. That creates guilt, because I think part of them almost resents the fact that they associate you with freedom, not because they resent you, because it feels unfair. Unfair to the person they're attached to. Unfair to you. Maybe even unfair to themselves. Like, why did it take meeting this person for me to admit I'm unhappy? But that's the distinction I need to make. You cannot be the reason they leave. Not really. Because if they separate only to get you, then they haven't actually dealt with the problem. They've just replaced one structure with another. This has to become, my current life is no longer honest for me, whether you are waiting on the other side of that door or not. And I think they know that actually the Five of Pentacles reverse makes me feel like they're starting to understand they have options. They previously told themselves they didn't have financially, practically, emotionally. And once somebody realizes I could actually change this, the conversation inside their head gets much harder to silence. Because now it's not just fantasy. Now they have to decide what truth they're willing to say out loud. And then you give me the Nine of Wands. Okay, that fits. Because psychologically, this is somebody who is exhausted but still standing there trying to hold everything together. And I think that may be the part nobody really sees from the outside. They may look functional, responsible, like they know what they're doing. But internally, I keep getting this image of somebody mentally carrying 10 different consequences at once. A bank balance, papers on a table, boxes that haven't been packed yet, 2 sets of keys that eventually have to become 1, a closet where somebody would have to decide what belongs to who, and then that horrible practical question. So what happens now? Because leaving something established is not just emotional. It changes routines. Money where you sleep. Who knows who gets upset? Maybe friendships become awkward. Maybe family members have opinions. Maybe there's a pet involved. Maybe there are plans already made months ahead that suddenly have to be canceled or explained. And I think this person has been trying to calculate the least destructive version of leaving. That's the part. They may not be delaying because they are unsure about you. They may be delaying because they know one decision creates 10 other decisions. But the Nine of Wands also says something uncomfortable. There may not be a painless version. Somebody gets disappointed. Somebody loses stability. Somebody has to hear something they don't want to hear. Maybe this person loses money. Maybe they lose access to a lifestyle they've become used to. Maybe they lose the identity of being the reliable one who never disrupts anything. And then they see you, and it's almost ridiculous how simple that part feels by comparison. One look, your eyes catch theirs. You say something, and they notice your mouth again. And for 5 seconds, none of the paperwork exists. None of the calculations exist. They just want you. Then reality comes back, which is why I keep saying the attraction cannot do the work for them. You cannot become the reward that makes them brave enough to leave. They have to decide their current situation is no longer honest, even if you never promise them anything, because otherwise they're not choosing freedom. They're choosing another dependency. And I think they understand that now. They know they cannot unknow it now because one emotional threshold has already been crossed. They have stopped imagining their current life as the only life available to them. And once somebody can genuinely picture themselves outside of a situation, even if they haven't left yet, something inside that situation has already ended, and now you give me the Three of Wands. Okay, that's the threshold. Because this card is about looking beyond what already exists and realizing there is a future outside of the current structure. Not necessarily knowing exactly what that future looks like, just knowing there is one. And I think that is what they cannot reverse anymore. They cannot go back to telling themselves this attraction is harmless or temporary or just physical, because something happened where the possibility of losing you became real to them. I keep getting an image of watching you leave. Maybe literally watching you walk away after a conversation. Maybe seeing you laughing with somebody else. Maybe noticing somebody else looking at you the same way they do, and there's this uncomfortable little reaction inside them. Not, you belong to me no more. Like, oh, I actually don't have any claim here that lands differently, because you are not frozen in place while they figure out their life. You could meet someone, you could decide you're done with mixed signals. You could simply move forward, and suddenly this person realizes that the possibility they've been keeping safely in their imagination has a clock attached to it. Wait, that explains why the attraction feels more intense now, because they want to rush physically, emotionally, all of it. They want to stop thinking about your mouth and actually know what it feels like to be close to you without pulling back. But the Three of Wands is almost forcing them to look further than the immediate desire. Like, if I do this wrong, what happens afterward? Because touching you before they've separated properly might satisfy the feeling for 5 minutes and complicate everything for months. And I don't think that's what they want this to become, which is such a strange contradiction. The stronger the desires gets, the more careful they may have to become. That's the part. They cannot rush towards you without first dealing with what is behind them. But they also cannot keep pretending they have unlimited time. And I think something about seeing you as somebody who could genuinely continue without them has changed the entire emotional equation. They know now that waiting has a cost too. And this is where I'm getting something really vulnerable. If they do eventually come towards you after making those changes, I don't think the first thing out of their mouth is going to be, I want you. I think it may be something closer to, you have no idea what I had to finally admit after I met you. And whatever comes after that, I think it involves telling you what they already had to let go of. And then you give me the King of Swords. Okay? That is exactly the kind of energy I would expect if this person ever came toward you after actually dealing with the situation, because this card is not about rushing in because the feelings are intense. It's about clarity, accountability, saying something difficult without hiding behind emotion. And I think that matters here. Because if this person approaches you properly, they cannot come in with, I was confused. They cannot make you responsible for understanding all of it for them. They would have to be able to say, my life was complicated. I knew it was complicated. And I handled what belonged to me before asking anything from you. That's very different. Wait, I'm seeing the doorway again. But the image has changed. There isn't a hand reaching backward anymore. The door is closed behind them. The key has already been used. And the bag, it's not sitting there waiting to be packed. It's already somewhere else. Again, psychologically, not predicting some literal scene, but symbolically, that's what honesty would have to look like. They cannot touch you while still asking you to ignore what they haven't finished, because then the touch would carry secrecy with it. Guilt explanation, someone else's unfinished story. And I don't think that's what they actually want from you. They want the moment to be clean, which makes me think about your eyes again, because your eyes were the thing that made them feel exposed. In the beginning, they had to look away because they felt like you could see too much. But if they had already taken responsibility, if there was nothing left to hide, then I think the thing they were afraid of becomes the thing they want most. They would want you to look directly at them and know that they were attracted to you before they were ready. Know that they kept their distance, because crossing that line too early would have made you part of something you didn't create. Know that they had to change their life without demanding reassurance that you would be waiting afterward. And I think there's another vulnerability underneath that. They may be terrified that after all of that, you could still say no. That you could hear everything and decide it came too late. But the King of Swords says the truth has to be told without trying to control the answer. That's the difference. So if they ever stand in front of you without that old door behind them, the question stops being whether they finally have permission to want you. It becomes something much more important. What are you actually supposed to do with that wanting? And how much of your life were you ever meant to put on hold for it? And then you give me the Three of Pentacles. Okay, that actually answers it. Because this card is about what can be built when everybody involved is actually showing up, honestly, not fantasy, not potential, not maybe one day something real enough that it requires participation. And I think that's your role here. You are not supposed to finish this person's separation for them. You're not supposed to help them figure out the money. You're not supposed to sit beside the packed bag while they decide whether they're brave enough to carry it out that belongs to them. Because look at how far this message came from the moon. We started with something hidden, something they could barely admit even to themselves. Your eyes making them feel exposed, your lips turning an emotional curiosity into something undeniably physical. And then suddenly there was the door, the keys, the belongings, the money, all of these practical things attached to one uncomfortable truth. Wanting you is easy. Becoming available for you is not. And those are not the same thing. Wait, I think that may actually be the entire point. They may feel something very real when they look at you. You may have awakened something they had buried, but that does not mean you owe them unlimited time to figure out what they're going to do with it, because the Three of Pentacles needs mutual effort. If somebody eventually comes towards you, they need to arrive, able to build with you, not asking you to stand outside the construction site while they're still tearing down another house. That's different. And I keep seeing the keys one last time, but now they're in their hand, not yours, their choice. Their access, their responsibility, same with the bag, same with the financial consequences, same with whatever conversation has to happen behind that door. You can care. You can feel the chemistry. You can notice the way they look at you and know there's something there. But you do not have to become emotionally half available because they are physically half free. And if they ever do come through that door, let them come through it fully. Let them look at you with nothing hidden behind their back. Let the words finally match what their eyes have been saying. Let the desire in their mouth be accompanied by truth coming out of it, because that's what makes the attraction worth anything. Not how badly they want to touch you, how honestly they are able to meet you when they finally can. And that brings us right back to the moon reverse. Something hidden, trying to come into the light. Maybe the most important thing coming into the light isn't simply that they want you. It's whether they're willing to become honest enough to deserve access to you.